Mamelodi Sundowns and Orlando Pirates. They're meeting for a heavyweight clash this evening to kick off the start of the Premiership. It returns following the pandemic-enforced break in just a few minutes at the Dobsonville Stadium, actually. Sports anchor Marc joins us now with more on this. Marc, good evening. Okay, I mean, this is so strange, right? Because normally you have, like, you know, you have a form guide. You know how people have been. I mean, Sundowns played over the weekend, but we haven't seen Pirates. And this actually must be quite tough for both coaches.
Can I sum up how strange this has been, Stephen? Yesterday on Prime, we spoke about the Goal, Coach and Player of the Month award that was handed out. When these awards get handed out, with each successive month that gets played. When was the last month of football being played in South Africa?
March?
Essentially was the end of Feb. Yesterday evening, we spoke about the February Player of the Month award. Because now that it's finally resumed, you close that gap and you give away last month's best player of the year. So, of the month, I beg your pardon. So, to sum it up, we have now spoken about February's best player, best goal of the month. So, I think the entire year is out of sync. We know this. The players are out of sync. The coaches have not been particularly happy. And it's through no one's fault, of course. It's coronavirus's fault. But the players, the coaches are not chuffed. They've been sitting basically back for the last 5 months. They now come back into a very, very busy schedule. You mentioned Sundowns played on the weekend. So for them, that'll be a nice little run-in of how things are meant to go. But for Pirates, this is their first cue. And what a game to open up. But you have Sundowns versus Pirates. Statistically, one of the highest scoring matches in South African football. People think that the derby is where all the excitement is. From a goals perspective, these two teams produce more goals than anyone else. So what a cracking way for South Africa after 5 months of starvation to finally get back into the mix when these two kick off late.
Goals in football, South African football. Right, we've got
Today
some live
is the
visuals,
case,
actually.
yes. Today is the case, absolutely.
Okay, we've got players warming up on the screen. That's what you're seeing at the moment.
Yes.
Now, this warm-up stuff is really important. I've made the comment to you before that this could, you know, this has the potential to be a feast of football or a fiasco of physios because of the high pace. I would think Sundowns having a run on the weekend actually does give them an advantage.
It certainly does. Some might argue perhaps, though, that maybe they've already played one extra game now that they shouldn't have to. Perhaps Pirates might come in fresher, some might say. So, you know what, it's 6 of the one, half a dozen of the other. I think that Sundowns will be pretty happy that they had a bit of a run-in over the weekend. But that said, coaches like to have some days in between. You don't want to play on the weekend and then midweek have another game again. But Sundowns have been doing this for years because of their success in Africa of late. So it shouldn't be anything new for them. I just wonder how much rust you'll see today from Pirates. They haven't been on the field, as we said, for so long. They're still expected to put up a really good fight. Sundowns are expected perhaps to be the slight favourites because they are Sundowns. They know how to close out matches. They are clutch, which is the term in sport. They know how to close out games. And people think that Chiefs went into the break top of the table makes them favourites. Well, I have a lot of people that have said that Sundowns, based on their history, based on Pitso, based on that mentality, they are favourites to overtake and potentially win the league.
You know, when something goes wrong, there's no substitute for experience, right? Yes. And the coronavirus, well, you know,
There's a lot gone wrong.
And someone like Pitso Mosamani, who has, you know, basically what a coach needs, technical skills, but also the, you know, I'm allowed to use this phrase in football, the man management.
Yes.
All of those things are really important.
Absolutely. You speak about that man management. What more do you do, or what else do you do, perhaps, over 5 months of no play? So that man management is crucially important. I think there's a reason why Pitso Mosamani is feared, not just throughout South Africa, but throughout Africa as well, because of their CAF confederations and Champions League success. When Pitso goes to play in Egypt, for example, which is seen as the epicenter of African football, there are murals of Pitso Mosamani's face in Egypt. That's how feared and how respected he is across the continent. So you don't become that guy by not knowing what you're doing. And Sundowns did very well, Patrice Motsepe bringing out the checkbook recently, to ensure that this guy stays with the club. So you cannot underestimate the role that Pitso plays with his club. It's evident to see. He's brought the success to them, and there's a reason why he's seen as one of the most successful coaches in the country. So you need to remember that there is a Pitso effect that comes along with Sundowns, who have an incredibly large squad. They have incredibly talented players, and when you mix all that up, there's a reason as to why people feel that Sundowns will have to do a lot to try and throw this away.
At the same time, I mean, we're still getting used to the novelty of no one in the stands, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, we've had hostile crowds before. Sundowns, you know, you travel Africa, you're going to have a hostile crowd, and you return the favour when, you know, the team comes back for the second leg. But here you've got an empty stand. And I mean, you can play as much Vuvuzela sound through the sound.
Well, this is it. We've seen it be used in Europe, haven't we, where they've recorded crowds and put them in. And if I'm not mistaken, that is not being used here in South Africa. So it certainly will be, you know, a training ground effect. And let's not forget the irony as well of Sundowns being the host today and playing Pirates at Dobsonville Stadium because of the draw that took place. Much like our Kaizer Chiefs will then be playing in Orlando as well. So there's been a real obscure way of putting these teams out as far as the hosts are concerned. But you're right, I think we are not too sure as to how this will play out. It's completely removed the home ground advantage. We know that all the teams have come into this biosafe environment based here in Gauteng. So you're right, you can remove the stadium effect, you can remove the crowd effect, and that might suit some teams then that perhaps might be under pressure, because if you were to go to a packed Loftus Versfeld and take on Sundowns where the crowd gets so into the match, Bloemfontein Celtic, famously known for being the best supported club in the country, if you remove that, a lot of the intimidation goes with it. So some clubs might actually prefer playing behind closed doors. They might feel it might remove some of that edge that the host may have.
The other advantage, of course, I mean, it really depends who's got depth in the squad.
Absolutely.
I mean, someone like Mosamani, who's so good at this, because he's, again, had to play Saturday and Wednesday, weekend and Saturday. Gosh, weekend and Wednesday games for such a long time. I mean, that experience really matters. You've got to be able to rotate the squad, and possibly the physios.
And he's got the biggest squad around. I mean, many would argue that there's no greater club that had that many players on the books than what Sundowns has in South Africa. They have so many people on their books. They have such a large squad, and this is where it's really going to come into play. And you're right, the physios, you cannot underestimate the role they're going to play here. Some might think that, we are being rather tongue-in-cheek here, saying the physios will be the busiest men tonight, but this is the reality. We're talking about hamstrings that are often going. That is the first go-to sign of a lack of playtime. And don't be surprised that whether it be tonight or tomorrow, where Chiefs play Wits, another massive game to open up, if we start to see hamstrings come and go, because that is just a sign that players have not had an opportunity to be properly warmed up, to be properly cured to go for this match. So we hope that they hold up. We hope that the physios don't play a major role, because the last thing you want to see towards the back end of this coronavirus-infected league is for a team to limp over the line. So best of luck to the physios. They certainly will be called upon.
A lot resting, actually, just for the whole sport of football. A lot resting over the next few days. If there's too much of it, I would like to think people are starved of it. You're going to want to watch it no matter how. But also too much of it, happening too quickly, too many teams going and playing with half a squad.
And will it be successfully done, Steve? That's the big question as well. Can you imagine the amount of pressure there must be on the PSL and on SAFA right now, knowing that if this doesn't work out, if this biosafe environment, this bio bubble doesn't work out, how much egg will then be on the face, and how much of these plans that almost has been seen as a front runner for government, because now we saw quite recently as well that governments have given SA Rugby the green light as well, and I have no doubt that they'll be using this biosafe football bubble as a training ground and as an example of how best to do it. So things need to run smoothly. A lot of the teams are now doing their post-match press conferences via Zoom after the matches. That's very new as well. So if post-match press conferences go out to the public, if we get our normal feed of South African football, if the biosafe bubble remains safe, players remain negative, and the league goes off without a hitch, it'll be seen as an incredibly well done job by the mother bodies here in South Africa. However, if things don't go right, and all of a sudden technical difficulties mean press conferences don't go out, and perhaps some positive cases creep in, then the entire exercise falls apart.